Hey everybody, welcome back. So I had a rather interesting topic for today's video. I wanted to talk about something that we know that we all deal with probably relatively often. We just don't want to admit it because it's a hard habit to break and, well, yeah, those are never fun. I wanted to talk about procrastination. So, for those of you who don't know what procrastination is, really all of us are guilty of it to some degree, but when we have things we don't really like to do, it's easy to just keep pushing it off more and more and more until really kind of the last minute. This happens a lot with projects, deadlines, homework, chores, really a lot of things that aren't fun, so that's why we keep putting them off. So, it's understandable why people put off things to the last minute, especially if it's something undesirable. But what is something that you can do to actually kind of get yourself back on task so you can eventually take this big old to-do list and kind of get to the bottom of it? Well, I think the first example that really kind of helps people stay on task when they are procrastinating pretty often is to have a to-do list, because not only do you have right in front of you all the things you have to do, but if you keep putting it off and then you keep having things to add to this list, well, that list is going to keep on growing, so you kind of feel more obligated to get to the bottom of it if you see this little list that keeps growing and growing and growing, and then at some point you're going to have to get to the bottom of it, or it's just going to keep getting worse, and then you don't want to overwhelm yourself with too many tasks and just too many things going on at once. So I always found that to be rather helpful if you really have a habit of kind of putting things off. It was also, in my opinion, also rather helpful because if you put off things for too long, or if you have a lot of things to do, it's easy to forget, and when things get missed, again, that to-do list just keeps growing. So if you actually have a to-do list that you make for yourself, it also helps you remember to get those tasks done, as well as also kind of motivating you, because like I said, you don't want to let it go for too long. So, one of the things you can also do is, if you have a rather large list of things that you need to accomplish, is kind of start with the things that either maybe won't take as much time, or things that you actually find maybe slightly more enjoyable. Like, if you have to do a lot of things like laundry, dishes, and then other errands you have to run, and if it's something like maybe you have to go to the store and get some things, and you really, really like shopping, you might actually be more obligated to do that one first, because that's something you actually enjoy, and especially if it's like, okay, maybe there's some things you have to get from the store, but then there's also things you need from the store, like things that you're running low on. You can kind of add that to the list while you're there, and if you're already going to be at the store getting one thing, and you have to get a couple other things there, and if it's a rather large store where you have different kind of like selections, departments, it's kind of just one more thing for you to just kind of pick up while you're there. So rather than having to make a couple separate trips, you can just kind of get that while you're there and just kind of, get a couple things done at once. Because if you have a lot of things to do, one of the things that can really make you feel more obligated to put things off is knowing that you have so many things to do. So one of the things I would add with kind of getting things done on your to-do list is, if you can get multiple things done fairly close together, or even at the same time, you can knock a couple things out at once. And rather than having one thing marked off your to-do list, you can have maybe 2 or 3 things if you have to go to the same place or 2 places close together to get those things done. I mean, let's face it, if you have chores that you need to do and you don't want to spend a lot of time doing them, it might actually just make more sense to just kind of get the ones done that are really close together, or if it's more of a deadline kind of thing, or if you have 2 things that have a very similar deadline, get them done very close together. That way it creates less work for you to do. Because, I mean, let's be honest, procrastination does have a little bit to do with laziness. Sometimes it has other things to do, like if you don't have time to do it, and if it's something that doesn't have to be done right away, it's easy to put it off. Or if it's something like maybe an errand or kind of chore, like shopping, that if you maybe do, like if you know you need to get a haircut and you usually do that with a friend, for example, you're going to be more likely to put that off if you're busy and your friend's busy too. And that might be a bit of an odd example, but sometimes things can kind of fall into place like that unexpectedly. So procrastination is something that can add up relatively quickly if it becomes a habit. And it's really kind of just the goal is really just kind of, even if you can just get yourself motivated a little bit, and especially with things like if you want to be more active and start exercising, let's be honest, that's a very easy thing to procrastinate on. And if you have a very, very busy schedule, if you have to work and you have a whole bunch of other things you have to do, if it's very hard to make time for, and if you can't make time for, there's a very good chance it's not going to get done. So if you use something like exercising, for example, Sometimes that can be one that if you're trying to do maybe half an hour a day, even if you can just do 5 minute increments, like 4 times a day, whether it's like in between your classes or if you're leaving work and you have other things you have to do, even if you can just do it here and there in between your day to day tasks, if you start to make it more of a habit, it will become more of a habit in your day to day life, and before you know it, it becomes a lot easier. And another kind of helpful thing that may also sound kind of silly is if you have a lot of tasks that you need to get done, or more so if it's something like exercising, for example, again, where if it's something you want to get yourself in the habit of doing, but you're having a hard time kind of keeping yourself focused, it's easy to get distracted. I mean, if you keep eyeballing the clock and you're really trying to do it for, like, let's say a half an hour, the time moves so slowly, and when the time moves so slowly, you really, really don't want to stick to it, and that makes it even harder. So what can you do? You can find a way to make it more entertaining, because if you make it more entertaining, if you make the time go by faster, then before you know it, 1 minute turns into 5 minutes, then 10, then 20, and then before you know it, that half an hour is up, and it actually felt like it flew by pretty quickly. So if it's something like exercising, there are a lot of very accessible apps that you can get for your phone if you have a smartphone that can really kind of keep your attention focused long enough to keep exercising for that duration of time. And a lot of these apps, if it's like some of those ones where maybe you have like an avatar and you're like walking around exercising, and it's like, maybe like some of those like little Pokemon ones and stuff like that. Not only can it divert your attention long enough to do something like exercising, but there's also, it's kind of like a little game in itself too. And if you get kind of rewarded for doing things like staying on task and everything while you play it, that kind of reward incentive also kind of, makes you want to keep going. And if you're a big gamer like me, once you get into a game, you get your heart set on it. So then you really want to keep going, and you really don't want to just give up on it. You might exercise for that half an hour and decide you want to keep going because you're really getting into your game. And then before you know it, you're really going above and beyond what you initially set out to do. And that can be a really wonderful thing. Like, you set out to do a half an hour, and then maybe you did like 45 minutes instead of just 30. So then another really great thing that helps with procrastination is if you set goals for yourself. So when you actually kind of, like, you get started on this first item on your to-do list, and you actually knock that out of the way, just really kind of feeling proud of yourself. And then, or if you have a certain duration of time, like, again, the exercising thing, or, maybe if you're buying things like groceries for your household and you really don't want to go more than a certain amount of money, really kind of finding ways to budget that. And then, maybe you stayed within that $100 range, or maybe you even save more than that. Really having that as a guideline to kind of keep yourself not only focused, but also that's kind of like an achievement that goes with it. I mean, our brain has kind of this punishment reward system, just kind of like anything. And when you kind of associate things with more reward, kind of pleasant thing, that tends to feel better for you. And then you kind of feel more obligated to keep on doing that rather than giving up, because you're really not making a lot of progress, or you're really not feeling good about that exercise routine that you're not sticking to. Because anytime you start any kind of new habit, any kind of to-do list, anything, it is very, very difficult to kind of rewire your brain and get yourself used to doing these tasks that weren't originally in your routine. So if you do struggle with that to some degree, don't give yourself a hard time. Just really just kind of keep at it. And if it's anything kind of like having trouble focusing on it, just really bringing your attention back to that couple different times, and just kind of like, okay, from now on we're going to start exercising for this amount of time every day, or okay, we're going to start on the first thing on our to-do list now. We have 5 things we need to do. Here's the first thing. Okay, we did that one, now the second thing. Just really kind of keeping yourself directed at the long-term goal, and trying not to take shortcuts too much, because sometimes you can get started on a to-do list, and then, okay, you got a couple things done and you're feeling really good about yourself, but then before you know it, you're like, oh, okay, well, I can do the rest of the stuff later. And then it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, because you go back to your old habits, because old habits are very difficult to break, and that is a normal part of life as well. So just really teaching yourself new habits is a very big part of it. So if you struggle a lot with procrastination, there are things that you can do to keep yourself focused, to keep yourself organized, and within time, you will learn to adapt to these new routines, these new tasks that you have to do, and sometimes you can have things you have to do that it's maybe a one-time thing, and then there's things like getting the groceries that you have to do every so often, and if you're not good about going to the store every certain amount of time to do that, really kind of like, okay, we got to start going more often. Or if you only go once every so often, if you need to maybe take smaller trips more often to be sure you get all of those things for your household without really overwhelming yourself, because you only have so much space in your car, you only have so much money at one time, and that can be the other reason to split it up, is if you have a budget and you like, again, you want to stay in that $100 range and you don't want to overspend, you can make different trips, according to paychecks and other things to consider when you kind of venture out to get those things. So, like I said, it's a very common thing a lot of people struggle with, so I do hope that some of these kind of like things, if you haven't already tried them, can really make things a lot easier, because procrastination is a very frustrating thing to deal with that not everybody talks about, even though a lot of us do it. So I apologize if this video is kind of all over the place. I don't usually make these this late in the day, and I had a lot of energy, and I was really feeling kind of hyped up to make another video, and I thought this would be a very great topic to talk about, as like I said, it's very common but not always talked about, because nobody wants to admit that they're slacking on some of the chores they have to do. So I really do hope that this helps people who are maybe kind of looking for some insight on that. But until next time, have a great day.